I didn't believe in haunted places, not until I spent that night in Oak Hollow. I wasn't looking for trouble. I just needed to escape. My life in the city had become unbearable, an endless cycle of the same dead-end job and toxic relationships. So, when my friend, Mark, suggested a weekend camping trip in a quiet, secluded forest, it seemed like the perfect solution. Oak Hollow wasn't far from the city, but its isolation was enough to make it feel like another world. The moment we arrived, I noticed something was off. The trees seemed taller, their branches twisting unnaturally. Shadows lingered longer than they should. And the quiet, God, the quiet, was unnerving. I shrugged it off, attributing it to my own stress and exhaustion. Mark and I pitched our tents by a small clearing near the center of the forest. The air was still, too still, but we laughed it off. Just nature doing its thing, Mark said, lighting a cigarette and watching the smoke curl upwards. That night, the wind picked up. It wasn't a normal breeze, though. It howled. It felt alive, as if it carried whispers, faint but insistent. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that the tension was all in my head. But as darkness fell, the forest seemed to change. The trees closed in, and the shadows thickened. That's when I heard it. A whisper, barely audible at first, like a soft breath against the back of my neck. I spun around, expecting to see Mark behind me, but he was by the fire, poking at the embers. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Hear what?" he replied, not bothering to look up. "A voice," I said, feeling foolish the moment the words left my mouth. He snorted, dismissing it as the wind. But I knew it wasn't. I knew what I heard. The whisper came again, this time clearer. It was a single word, stretched out like a groan. "Leave." My heart pounded. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but my gut told me something was terribly wrong. Mark noticed my unease and handed me a beer. "Relax, man. You're wound too tight. You need this." I took the bottle and forced a smile. Maybe he was right. Maybe I just needed to unwind. But the forest wouldn't let me. It was alive that night, watching, waiting. Around midnight, the fire died down and the wind calmed. The night settled into an oppressive silence. Then it started again, the whisper louder this time, circling us like a predator. It wasn't just one voice, it was many, overlapping, echoing in the trees. Mark heard it now too. He stood up, his eyes darting around the clearing. "All right, this isn't funny," he called out, but no one answered. The voices grew louder, clearer. They weren't saying leave anymore. They were chanting, whispering our names. "Alex? Mark?" I froze. How could they know our names? Mark grabbed his flashlight and pointed it into the trees. "Who's there?" he yelled, his voice shaky. The beam of light cut through the darkness, but it revealed nothing. Just trees, endless trees. The chanting stopped. For a moment, everything was still. Then we heard something else. A low growl. It came from the direction of the trees just beyond the reach of our firelight. Mark took a step back, his face pale. "We need to go," he muttered, panic rising in his voice. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. We packed up in silence, moving quickly but clumsily in the dark. The growling continued, closer now. The whispering had returned too, louder, angrier. We couldn't see anything, but we could feel it. The presence in the woods. Something was out there, watching us, hunting us. As we stumbled through the trees, the growls followed us, always just out of sight. The whispering grew frantic, almost screaming now. "Leave, leave." But we couldn't. We were lost. No matter which direction we ran, the trees seemed to close in around us, the path twisting and turning back on itself. I could hear Mark's breathing, shallow and fast. He was panicking, and I wasn't far behind. That's when we saw it, a figure in the trees. At first, it looked like a person, tall and gaunt, standing impossibly still. But as we got closer, I realized it wasn't human. Its limbs were too long, its body twisted, and its face, oh God, its face was blank, smooth as if someone had erased it. It didn't move. It didn't need to. The whispering stopped. The growling stopped. Everything stopped. Time itself seemed to freeze. Then, without warning, the figure moved. Not in the way a person moves, but like a shadow, flickering from one place to another in an instant. One moment it was in front of us, the next it was behind. Mark screamed, dropping his flashlight, and bolted into the darkness. I wanted to follow him, but my legs wouldn't move. The figure was there, in front of me again, its featureless face inches from mine. It whispered, but this time it wasn't telling me to leave. Stay? My vision blurred and my head swam. The forest spun around me. I could hear Mark screaming somewhere in the distance, but his voice was fading, swallowed by the night. I don't remember falling. I don't remember how long I was out. But when I woke up, the sun was rising and the forest was silent. I called out for Mark, but there was no answer. I searched for hours, stumbling through the woods, shouting his name. But he was gone. No trace of him. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing. It was as if the forest had swallowed him whole. When I finally made it back to the car, my mind was a blur. I wanted to believe it had all been a dream, a hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something was in those woods, something ancient and hungry. I haven't gone back since. I can't. Sometimes I think I hear the whispering again, late at night, just outside my window. It calls my name, soft and insistent. And I know one day I'll have to go back. It won't let me stay away forever.